Hey, ladies. So this is our decolonization lecture number 3 that is all about apartheid. So let's take a look at our do now. So this question is, the two questions are actually looking at the image to the right. So the first one is, what event is depicted in the photograph above? Hopefully you can take a look at that by using the sourcing information. And then, why is the event depicted historically significant? So it gives you a little bit of ideas about how makes an event historically significant. It's got to be important or impactful to people at the time, had lasting effects on people or society, was a moment of change or transition in history, was representative of broader trends or changes in society. This is the same type of way that we would identify something as being an enduring issue. So don't forget, you can always pause this, take a few minutes, and respond to those questions. And our objective for today is to define apartheid and give examples of ways that individuals and groups fought to end apartheid in South Africa. So we are going to be all focusing on apartheid today. And there we go, apartheid. So apartheid doesn't begin with imperialism, but it is an effect of imperialism. So when we look at South Africa, it is founded in 1910, and there is a 20% white population, which dominates the majority black/mixed population, denying them basic rights. I'm sorry, I got cut off there. So when you are looking at South Africa and you're looking at the policy of apartheid, you really need to focus on what is going on because of imperialism. The white population got there because of imperialism, and they had been living there for hundreds of years, back to when all the Dutch had settled in South Africa. So these white Afrikaners really did believe that they were part of South Africa and that they were themselves Africans. So in 1913, the African National Congress, or the ANC as we're going to refer to it from now on, formed to protest racist policies. They used violence, they used civil disobedience, but frankly, they were just not very successful. If we think about 1913, this is prior to World War I, and racism was still by and large a very common practice, especially in Africa. Both of these videos will be available, this one and the one that we come up to in a minute, will be available in the apartheid Google form that you can complete for extra credit. So in 1948, apartheid was established. So South Africa had gained their independence at this point for a very long time, but they didn't have this set of apartheid laws until 1948. And apartheid just means the segregation of the races. You can see right in that word that you see the word apart. Blacks and whites are going to be apart. And it established separate homelands, established a pass system so that they could regulate the movements of Black South Africans. It's really important that while we're looking at apartheid, that we are referring to these groups of people as Black South Africans and white South Africans, that we call them exactly along those lines, because if we just refer to them as Africans, we don't know if you're referring to Black South Africans or white South Africans. So here's an example of that pass system. So most Black South Africans would have these pass books, very similar to an ID card or a driver's license, where they would show not only where they lived, but maybe if they had a special job that allowed them to go into white areas of South Africa, and a reason as to why. If you take a look at the sign on the very top left, it says that any Native Indians or colors, if they enter the premises at night, you'll be listed as missing. Armed guards shoot on sight. Savage dogs devour the corpse. You have been warned. And those are very common to be seen in South Africa. And apartheid basically just allowed white South Africans to control the nation's government and economy. And you can see this is the government of South Africa in 1948. And these are all white men. So this did not give any authority or chance to gain authority to any Black men, even though they made up over the majority of the population. They had no rights in their own nation. And again, this video will be available on the apartheid Google form that you can do for extra credit. So here we have Nelson Mandela, who in 1964 was the leader of the ANC and imprisoned for agitating against apartheid. So he used strikes, sabotage of property, demonstration. He is officially charged with terrorism against his nation in an attempt to overthrow the government, which in fact is what he was really trying to do. He was attempting to overthrow the apartheid system, which was the government's basis of power. And even while he was imprisoned, he didn't stop advocating for change. He continued to advocate. Now, what's important to realize about Mandela is that he starts out using nonviolence, and then after the Sharpeville massacre, he does begin to turn violent. He does see it as, if they're going to use violence against us, then we will continue to use violence against them. He attempts at his best to not take any lives and not actively attempt to kill any white Africans, but he does do damage. He starts blowing up government buildings and starts, setting fires and doing things that are very violent. And while he's in prison, he goes back to believing that really it needs to be all about nonviolence. And he's learning those things from people like Gandhi. Now, Gandhi, again, just like we saw in the previous lecture, Gandhi was able to successfully gain the independence of India from Great Britain, but it takes a very long time. And it is very hard to convince a group of people to wait and be beaten and be abused and to continue to wait for someone to give them their rights. And if you look at the political cartoons, they're saying, "In you go, Mandela," and they're standing out there waiting, and then they're like, "Okay, you can come out now." And they were like, "See, that showed him." Eventually, Mandela is released from prison after and before the apartheid laws are officially ended, and then once they are ended, he is officially free. He was given multiple opportunities to leave his prison sentence early because he was in prison for life, and he refused those unless all other people who were arrested under these apartheid laws were also given freedom. In 1976, the United Nations condemned apartheid, and the international pressure began building against South Africa's racist policies. In 1976 and the 1980s, people actively spoke out against this. There were banners and there were gatherings of people. There were music festivals that were dedicated to ending this apartheid system and freeing Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela really became almost like, the poster person for ending apartheid. And people all around the world were like, this is wrong. And they began economic sanctions where they wouldn't let them trade. South Africa was not allowed to participate in one of these sets of Olympics because they wouldn't let Black players in, and because of what they were doing in their country. And as you can see, there were tons of posters out there across the entire world advocating for the end of the apartheid system. Now, obviously, Nelson Mandela was not the only person advocating for the end of apartheid. Another famous person is Bishop Desmond Tutu, who really started to work with these foreign nations. He tried to limit businesses from trading and investing in South African government and the economy of South Africa and South African businesses. And as we've seen throughout the past, when the economy of a country begins to suffer, they will start to make changes to pacify people because they can't survive economically if it goes all the way. All right. Tutu's efforts were designed to punish South Africa economically for these apartheid policies. His focus was, how do we punish South Africa economically for what they're doing politically? So they would look at things, there would be posted out there, look before you buy, boycott the products of apartheid, end all sports ties with South Africa. All right. Boycott South African goods, and it would say contaminated with apartheid. All right. Coca-Cola, boycott now. Coke sweetens apartheid because Coca-Cola was using sweeteners that were bought in South Africa. And ultimately, in 1989, F.W. de Klerk, who becomes president of South Africa, he really starts to work to end these apartheid laws. And in 1990, he legalizes the ANC. He releases Mandela from prison, and he ends the apartheid laws. In 1994, South Africa held the very first open presidential election where all races could vote. You can see some of the images of these Black South Africans lining up for miles and miles for the very first time that they could vote. And with no surprise, Mandela easily won. The South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission was created to help the nation overcome abuses and violence of this apartheid era. What you have to realize is that Nelson Mandela did an amazing thing when he took over as president, and he did not punish people who were white. He didn't go after them, and he tried to build an era in South Africa where they wouldn't feel the need to go after each other, where they could look at it and say, we're going to rebuild together, we're going to rebuild stronger. And victims of apartheid violence were invited to share their stories with government, and perpetrators of violence could testify to be pardoned of their crimes. They would go and say, this is what I've done, and this is how I acted, so that they could be pardoned of their crimes. And if you look at this political cartoon, again, this being Desmond Tutu right here, name, Eugene D. Knock. Ah, Mr. Danak, have you listed the crimes for which you will be applying for amnesty? And he says, yeah, which means yes. And then you can see the long list of crimes that he was guilty of. So if you take a look in here, oh, and I just see I forgot to update. So this section should be talking about your apartheid, not India. That was your homework from before, but I'll make sure to say it out loud for you. So you can complete your note summary, but really, again, not the India partition. I'll update that and make sure that you remember it during the Google Meet on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday is your apartheid paper. So you're going to use those documents and you are going to determine what really ended apartheid. You know, what were some of these tactics and, you know, how effective were they at ending apartheid? That paper is due in Google Classroom on Sunday. If you have any questions, concerns, you don't understand something, you need additional help, please join the Google Meets from 12:30 to 1 every single weekday. I know you girls always reach out if you need something, but shoot me a text message, shoot me a Google Hangout message, send me an email. Let me know where you're struggling so that I can help you. And as always, ladies, please stay safe out there.